I'm going to call this meeting of the Audit Committee of Del Mar College to order. I'm Rudy Garza, and I'm serving as chairman. Our chairman, Ed Bennett, is away because of personal issues. First thing is Quorum Call.
Carol Scott.
Carol Scott is here. Rudy Garza is here. It's 2/3 of us. We have a quorum. At this time, we're going to ask for a moment of silence. Thank you. Pledge of Allegiance. Carol.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We are now going to read the Del Mar College vision statement. Del Mar College will be the premier choice for life-changing educational opportunities provided by responsive, innovative faculty and staff who empower students to improve local and global communities. Del Mar College is streaming live audio and video from the official Board of Regents meetings, this particular audit meeting, on the college's website in real time, with the exception of portions of this meeting considered to be closed session by statute. Do we have anyone that wants to address the audit committee? Any public comments? There are no comments at this time. We're going to go on to our agenda. At this time, we're going to have we're going to skip item 1, operational discussion and possible action. Our chair's not here, so we're going to bypass our review of committee charter, the overview, the college audit functions, and the outline of the committee objectives. Is that okay, committee?
Yes, sir.
Okay. At this time, can we have our presentation related to number 2, which is the discussion and possible action related or regarding the college's internal audit activity?
All right. New system. Okay. Good afternoon. Dan Graves with Weaver. I'm a partner with Weaver, the college's internal auditor. With me today is Brandon Tanis, one of our other partners who has led a couple of our audit engagements. We're here to give you a status of our internal audit activity and summary of our reports. So today we'll be going over the wrap-up of the fiscal year 2022 internal audit plan, which included an audit over the purchasing function, internal audit follow-ups over prior year internal audits, an internal audit over construction management, and we'll give you a status on our information security internal audit. Brandon is going to cover the purchasing and the internal audit follow-up, so I'll let him start.
Well, thank you, and happy to be here to give you all a status on these audits that we have completed or some that are still ongoing. So our first is the internal audit of purchasing. This audit is still in progress. We initiated it in July with team. Due to some of the staffing changes and some of the challenges occurring currently in the purchasing department, along with some of the high volume of procurement activity with the new campus, there has been some delays and because of those deadlines. And so, but we are actively working with management to complete that audit, working with all the supporting documentation so we can complete our testing and then come back to you all hopefully soon with a report on that audit. To reiterate the scope of that engagement, so that it is looking at the risk and internal controls related to the college's purchasing processes. So that looks at the entire cycle from the initiation of a purchase order in a department through actually the bidding or formal procurement practices, interlocal and cooperative agreements, so our informal purchase processes, contract negotiation, vendor management, and vendor acceptance and setup. So we have completed our design evaluation pieces of looking at the controls and addressing the risk, and in the process of testing of specific different types of purchases that have occurred at the college to ensure they're meeting the expectations.
Do we have any kind of time frame as to when that might be complete?
So our goal right now is to have that audit all completed and through our internal quality review process by the end of October. We are working with management's been giving us our supporting documentation and working steadily with us. And so I know some of the deadlines with the other procurement priorities with the construction projects and so forth kind of put that a little bit behind. But when we went to go kick off the audit, definitely we were told about those deadlines, and so we've been flexible with them. So. But our goal is to wrap up our testing and procedures and have that through reviewed in October so we can come later this fall to have that report to you all.
Okay. Carol, any questions? When, Dr. Escamilla, when do you think we might be able to put that on the agenda for a regular meeting?
We've discussed in any of the next three, well, it won't be the October, but it'll be November, December, January. If it doesn't get to January, it's either going to December or February. I think, Dan, we talked about it the other day.
Yes, we're hoping for the November.
November,
If we can
okay.
get everything closed
Yeah,
out
that's-
through October. We're hoping for the November meeting to get it done, but definitely before calendar year end.
Yeah, even December would be good, but yeah, in the calendar year.
So we
would
have
be
it,
good.
so this fall, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And we will definitely make that a priority, make sure we work with management, they understand those deadlines as well so we can get that completed. So, thank you. Any other questions on purchasing?
No,
All right.
not for me. Carol.
So definitely happy to share some very positive news about the college of our internal audit follow-ups. So we had 3 specific follow-up projects that we started this summer and are coming to complete those. All 3 of these follow-ups have been remediated, and so we are not coming back to you all with any open areas that we need to come back to look at these audit areas. So very happy to present that. And definitely management's actions to address those risks and implement recommendations. The first one, admissions and registrar, the original audit was in 2015. And every year we've done follow-up on those. This was our last one with 2 partially remediated findings. Of those, one was remediated, one was closed, and so we'll talk about what that entails. So the first one, advisor training, that is considered remediated as part of the college's QEP implementation. An advisor continuing ed, that one is closed. The college has met the QEP's goal of 100 faculty and professional advisors who attended professional development training. So overall, they had 119 that attended in FY22. This was closed because we did set a new goal of this having at least 100 instead of 100%. I think when we originally was talking about 100%, we said that may not be feasible with the rotation of faculty and so forth to be able to actually have that as an achievable number. So setting these goals, and definitely a lot of progress has been made. So of these 2 would close out the remainder. This is really about the training and continuing ed for advisors. Definitely when we talk about advisors, the 2 separate types of advisors. Your full-time advisors, which we've seen for quite some time now, compliance with all the training and continuing ed. When you have faculty advisors, so their full-time job is not, of course, advising, but also advise as part of their faculty roles, those were some of the areas that we needed to get the numbers up into training and continuing ed, and a lot of progress has been made. So we can consider this area closed. Any questions on that area? Okay. Our next one is kind of similar. We talk about student services. We did this original audit in 2019, and we had one finding that we were following up on. And this one we are considering closed. It's about documentation of the advising sessions. And so we found that previously, policy and procedure and training has been implemented, and to ensure that the sessions of those sessions with students were documented within colleague and Civitas. Processes and training, of course, have been implemented with full-time advisors, and they're all completing that training. And of course, the number of documented advising sessions has increased from prior years, almost double of the sessions that occurred the last time we tested this area. And the implementation of the new ERP system is expected to help ensure that is a required field. What we did see was there was still some cases where the sessions weren't documented consistently. We believe with the new ERP system, having a field as a required field to ensure that session is documented will be an enhancement in the existing control structure in the future years. These changes and the progress that they have made, we would consider this one closed as well.
I have a couple of questions about this one. So when you talk about increase from the prior year, what 2 years were you comparing?
Fiscal year 21 and fiscal year 22.
Yep.
Okay,
So there were approximately 5,000 in fiscal year 21, and there were almost 9,000 in fiscal year 22.
Right.
wow,
And
okay.
That's between the two systems of
Colleague and
Colleague
Civitas.
and Civitas as well. So we looked at both systems, compared the two. It's roughly the same percentage of students from year to year, but the total number has vastly increased. And there's a system limitation in Colleague that doesn't make that a required field. So with the implementation of the new ERP, making that a required field, we can enforce more compliance. So rather than continuing to follow up on that and continuing to monitor from a use of internal audit resources, we're recommending that close, that one be a close finding, and then with the implementation of the new ERP, having that as a required field that will force 100% compliance at that point.
So you're looking at it from an audit and compliance standpoint, and then institutional effectiveness or academic affairs will look at the actual result of that advising. Are we getting, so you're just looking at the raw numbers, did it happen? You're not doing
Right.
any
Correct.
quality control and what happened with that student. Those questions would go to Dr. Wilson and Dr. Wilson.
Exactly.
Okay.
It'd be outcomes based on the metrics of the strategic plan, and then in addition, as we move ahead with the new plan, we could fortify, adjust the thresholds there, and for the next 5 years. Beyond that,
As part of our evaluation of the current plan, so our calendar to get to a new strategic plan will include an evaluation. So I think it's important to talk about this piece because of the QEP and because of Project Cinda and the investment we've made in the ERP and others. So again, it's not a question for the auditors, I apologize,
No.
but it just,
But it all dovetails together.
yeah, it begs the question about effectiveness and making sure that the board understands how those investments have borne fruit.
yeah, and especially as we move towards more outcomes-based measures that'll be enforced by, well, I shouldn't say enforced, but will be expected either way by the coordinating board. So, duly noted.
So that was my question. Again, I apologize for taking up your time.
No, happy to answer any questions. And to clarify, we were able to validate that the sessions did occur. That when we have comments that should be entered in comment boxes or certain documentation within comment boxes, those aren't required fields, but we could see that the session occurred. So they are attending the sessions and so forth, but it's policy, right? So one of these things is also looking at feasibility and what should we be doing, and an internal audit standpoint of looking at risk and where that risk lies with this particular area. We believe it's a lower risk because we can see that the session occurred. It's just the commentary is not documented in the field.
Pardon my ignorance, but I've got a question related to privacy or security of these sessions. It's great to have documentation of what was discussed and what the goals are of the student and how our advisors might be able to help. But how do we protect the student's privacy in terms of this documentation not being released or accessed by?
No, that's a great question. And definitely during the original audit, we did look at user access and who has access to those systems. We determined that access is appropriate. And so to get into Civitas or into those student records, there are certain fields, and definitely there's different modules of Colleague that have restrictions that are based. So that's where the student privacy aspect is covered, is to make sure that the right people have the right access. And that is something that has already been evaluated. And so that's just not something we followed up for this audit because all we had remaining was this one area. And so the original 2019 audit had covered many different areas of student services and included looking at user access.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Anything else? Okay.
Yeah. And I'll go to our final one. And so this one was grant management for in 2018. Definitely a lot of work that management has done in regards to grant administration and grant management. So definitely kudos to those folks, and definitely with the grants management handbook and the starter kit that were developed. I know they leverage some best practices, but this is also something I think to be really proud about at the college because it is a top-notch document that was created. Very thorough, very specific, and I think something that we had in mind when we originally were talking to those people, making sure that how do we set up the college for success. And so there were 6 partially remediated findings last time. Mainly that was due to the handbook and kit still being in draft form. And so there were some things that were still being finalized when we did the follow-up last time, which had those as partially remediated. So we came back to look now that those are finalized, and we were able to say that all of these have been remediated. And so the first one, we talk about policy and procedures. Those are defined, very detailed and specific in the Grants Development Handbook, which has been disseminated, and also the Grant Starter Kit, which provides guidance on all the grant procedures for the college. So it's not just people within the grant office, but also people that are utilizing grants throughout the college. Training that has also been remediated, so there is annual training that's provided by the grants department, and attendance is being tracked and monitored to make sure that people that are using grants are going to this training. That really establishes the expectations for the college. Each grant has its own requirements, and they are going to those trainings, but this is more about what are the expectations here at Del Mar if you're going to manage and monitor a grant. The tracking of awards, this has been remediated. This is really about your grant portfolio and having a complete and updated grant portfolio that identifies the PI along with the amount and the dates. And we were able to validate that that has been improved and in place. Next is communication of grant requirements. So when we get a grant, how do we disseminate those requirements to everybody that is involved? We do see that as being remediated. It's part of the project kickoff checklist. There's also very specific details within the grant development manual and starter kit on what you need to know and how you need to communicate. And we were able to see that that communication occurs with grant stakeholders throughout the college. And lastly is approving reports. So there's 2 different types of reports in any given grant. A financial report, so whether it's a reimbursement grant or you're stating how you use the money that you got in advance, and then programmatic reports. So are we meeting our metrics and so forth? And so we did validate that the review of those reports is completed and documented on the checklist, and that those are also prescribed within the handbook, that it is a requirement by the college to have that done. So that ensures any report that leaves the college and goes to any type of regulatory body where the grant is coming from, that has been reviewed and approved prior to being submitted. So happy to report that all 6 of those have gone from partially to fully remediated.
Question?
I don't have a question, but remind me, wasn't this one of Mr. Garcia's priorities when he came and joined us as CFO, was to get this grants management department up and running?
Yes.
Yes, it was. Thank you, Dr. Escamilla, for raising the bar, and Mr. Weaver, folks from Weaver, for bringing it to our attention. It was definitely an opportunity to really transition the department. There was a complete overhaul, not only in people, but also operational, and all the heavy lifting was really done by Dr. Larry Lee and Christina Gonzalez. I mean, they just really took off with this issue and really transitioned it to what it is today. So great job to the 2 of them.
Well, they get to report on the closing out and remediation of these issues, but I know the leadership came from you and from your team, and so just wanted to call you out and give you a attaboy.
Thank you.
At a team.
Just a follow-up question. Mr. Garcia, you feel comfortable with progress we made and the direction we're going?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
You feel comfortable with the progress that's been made and the direction we're going?
Yeah, so the world of finance is always changing. So we got it to this stage, and we just got to keep our eye on what's changing and keeping up with those changes. So, but I'm comfortable where it's at today, and there's definitely always opportunity for improvement. But
Just kind of a follow-up question along that. We talked about change. From a training standpoint, I mean, do we have a set schedule? Do we provide additional training if you have large turnover in key positions? How do you determine when you're going to have a training session for either older employees or tenured employees and new employees?
yes, so the vision that we set and have in mind was to definitely train all those individuals who are new to the program. And in terms of continuous training, I would have to get back to you on that.
Okay. That's all right.
But
You-
we
you
have
could-
a manual and we have a process, and I'm pretty certain we have a tickler file to see who and when that training was performed.
If you can just have that information for when they do the presentation for the entire board, that would be great.
I'm sorry, what was that?
If you could just have that information for when they do their presentation to the board, that would be great.
Okay, absolutely. Yes, sir.
And there is to kind of provide some clarity on the training. So definitely they've developed a training program. There's also a grants SharePoint training dashboard, which shows the available training, and they can monitor who's taken that. And so right now the focus has been annual, but there is other trainings that are also available. And I would say there's definitely a very collaborative environment. So if someone has questions or how to do something, they're definitely stepping in and doing that hands-on. It's not all go watch a training video and learn what you need to do. So I think you have a combination of making sure everybody has the same expectations on what the role and responsibilities are. You have the handbook, but also being able to monitor who's actually taking the training and who needs to. And that is all done through a SharePoint dashboard right now. Anything else on our follow-ups? All right, well, very happy to bring that to y'all's attention that we were able to close out so many of these reports. I know definitely management's worked hard to implement those, and definitely appreciate all of their time and effort. Now I'm going to hand it back over to Dan.
All right.
So for
Thank
the
you.
rest of the year, we had a couple other major audits aside from the procurement. One of those was construction. Construction management, to be specific. The audit covered an evaluation all the way from the master development plan through the purchasing cycle, construction plan approval, all the way through monitoring and accounting for construction projects. The fieldwork, we completed fieldwork September 8th, and we had an exit meeting with the facilities, physical facilities department and management just last week. And so we've got a draft report that's going through our reporting process, but we've gone over all the findings with management, so I feel comfortable bringing those to you today. It's really just finalizing a lot of the ancillary language around the report. So this report will have an unsatisfactory rating, and you'll see why. We've got the coverage period for this audit went all the way back from November 1st of 2020 through April 30th of 2022. Just to provide some context, there was some staffing changes. We had other personnel who were in charge of that. Now we have John Strybos. He's only been here for a limited amount of time during that coverage period. So we do have, our findings do span that entire time frame. But just wanted to provide some additional context around that for you while we go through these different findings. You see we have 8 total findings. We had 3 objectives, our objective A and objective B. Objective A is the design of the process. Do we have all the right procedures and controls in place to help monitor and guide the process? And objective B was what we have in place, is it working effectively? And then objective C was a verification that your vendors who perform the contracting process, that they're in compliance with the terms and conditions of their contract. So you'll see there we've got 2 unsatisfactory ratings for the objectives A and B, and then objective C we have a satisfactory rating, totaling up to be a cumulative unsatisfactory rating for that report. Going through the findings, I think largely, especially covering that entire span of time, there's a lack of standard operating procedures, and then I think is the sort of linchpin for all the rest of the findings, and you'll see that as we go through. Not having standard operating procedures to govern the standards and conduct of the physical facilities office to govern that construction management process. So that includes having what documents are we going to require, how often are we going to require certain inspections, where's the documentation going to live, how are we going to title it, store it, pretty much all those key functions. And you'll see the rest of a lot of the other findings accumulate in the fact that we weren't able to obtain documentation, and that all centers around sort of the standard operating procedures of what are we going to keep, where is it going to be stored, how long are we going to keep it, who's responsible. And so that's really If I had one thing to tell you is that that's what needs to be addressed, is getting some standardized operating, just like we had in grants management, and this is where we were with grants management in 2018, is we didn't have standard operating procedures. We didn't have standard guidance to guide the personnel who are responsible for that function and how we were going to conduct business. Now, did we still do a lot of really good things? Yes, we did. But for the things that we were looking for as part of our internal audit, the things that we thought were key, there were quite a few things that we weren't able to obtain. Finding 2 goes along with that as far as file maintenance and documentation. The documentation retained across all the projects that we looked at was inconsistent. It was stored in different places, different elements, different artifacts, if you will, of those projects. Some were retained, some weren't. We have things from the purchasing cycle that were missing, so different vendor evaluations. We had other key documents, warranty inspections, various things that we would normally expect to be part of that entire construction management cycle. We weren't able to obtain just because we couldn't find them. The physical facilities department couldn't find them. We went through the eBuilder software ourselves. We got auditor access to that. We weren't able to find it, and so that's really the culmination of finding 2. Finding 3, the rest of the findings do go through that and are results of not being able to obtain certain documents. We had 5 different change order requests that we sampled and looked at. One of those for the general academic and music building, we didn't have evidence of approval by the architect and chief physical facilities officer. So normally when a change order comes through, you have different layers of approval. We saw the change order was in sets of change orders. It was definitely listed on other pay applications, the amounts, but the approval of the change, we didn't have official documentation for the approval of the change. Insurance certificate monitoring, having adequate procedures in place to monitor the insurance certificates, cover the entire period of the construction. This is a key piece to help protect the college, to make sure that we have insurance certificates. We just didn't identify a process by which those are continuously monitored. They're usually annual. They do expire, making sure that we have the most current version on hand. We didn't see procedures for that. And then additionally, the storage of those are all on a local computer versus a network shared drive that's backed up. So there's a little bit of concern on our part with how those are stored and accessible for everyone in the college, for the college in general. If that one computer crashed, you run the risk of losing that information. And then construction bonds. There was one bond for the projects that we looked at, the one for Oso Creek, that we had about a year's gap between when construction started versus the first bond certificate that we could find. So having, again, performance bonds in place in case something happens with the construction, we had about a year's gap because we weren't able to obtain the documentation to support that prior year. We did have one payment authorization where we were unable to have evidence that was approved by the facilities department to be paid prior to its release. The last 2, operation maintenance and document transfer. So there's a concept in construction from taking a project from a construction in progress state to a finished state. And it's not uncommon to have sort of a gap there. Normally in a lot of other institutions, you see a construction department and then an operations and maintenance department, and they're separate. Del Mar doesn't have that. They have one person in charge of both, which I think is to your benefit in a lot of ways. But we still didn't see, usually what we see is a lack of handoff from one department to the other to say, we're done, here's all your documentation, here's your owner's manuals, here's the recommended operations and maintenance schedules, and then transitioning it off into the operations and maintenance department. That's still an important piece of the process, even though it's overseen by one person in one department. Still having a part where we say, here it is, it's done, here's all the final documentation, and then moving it into an operations and maintenance phase is something that we didn't see yet. This is a very common issue. In fact, I haven't gone through a construction operations audit yet and not have this, but it's worth mentioning so that we can have an ongoing maintenance plan, because usually that's where in institutions of higher education and in large government and it's governmental institutions, the ongoing maintenance piece is what gets missed, and you end up with a lot of deferred maintenance and deferred maintenance costs, which becomes another problem down the road. So this is hopefully something to set you up for future success in other areas as well. And then finding A, it has to deal with, we were missing one page out of a contract. Out of the 4 different projects we selected, there was one page that we weren't able to obtain in the final records. That particular page included the insurance coverage requirements. So although we were able to obtain certificates of insurance for that project, we couldn't validate that they matched the contract. And so this is the one in the contractor compliance that brought it down from if you recall, we have strong, satisfactory, unsatisfactory. So that's why Objective C is satisfactory. It's because all the other compliance components, we just couldn't find this one piece. So that's it for construction. Those are the 8 findings. We do have management's responses. We've talked with John. We've even met with Mark on this. And really the big piece of it is having those standard operating procedures that govern the rest of the story. That say, this is where we will do things, this is how we are going to operate in this area, this is how we're going to store documents, this is where they're going to be stored, this is who's responsible. And that would include various checklists for making sure that we have all the right things in place. And so that is where, here's the responses. These will also be incorporated into the report, like all of our others. But those do include, using the standard checklist for change order requests, having some additional checklists for the finalization and completion, and monitoring the ultimate storage of all the documents that should be stored as part of a construction project. So any questions? There's a lot, I know.
Lots of questions. Do you want to start with some comments first, Dr.?
Yeah, if you don't mind, Madam. Sure. Regent Scott, this is a, we have the same scenario repeating itself, and as we're moving in with personnel, just like we just talked about with Mr. Garcia. And when these were presented to me the other day, I think a couple of days ago, I wanted everybody to be clear that neither Mr. Strybos and we're going to talk about IT here in a little bit and some things with Ali. Obviously, he's just been here a few weeks, but these are things that existed prior to. And this is what I hope our greater community, starting with our Board of Regents and the Audit Committee, certainly understand that the purpose for the internal audit is to improve on these things that we frankly did not know about, did not have the measures to put in place to minimize these risks. We have been, all things considered, we've been very, very fortunate. I don't want to say lucky. We've been very fortunate because there's been a lot of due diligence and a lot of good things that have come from our construction as we continue to transform this college. That being said, these things existed prior to Mr. Strybos. Mr. Strybos has been catching up as quickly as he can and to remediate these things. And I want everybody to know that at the end of the day, this falls on the President's office, and that as we've done with grants and as we've done with Weaver over the past several years, we look forward to continue to improve upon these processes to mitigate risk, because there's still much in front of us, much construction, much technology improvements and so forth in front of us. But I just want to make that clear, and thank you for allowing me to make those comments. Regent Scott.
Of course. So my question is about the technology, and obviously the standard operating practice or procedure on using the technology and the networks and the systems in place, and then the compliance with that. So one, do we have the right system? Is eBuilder the right platform? Or is that the starting point? Are there other platforms? Is there a platform solution to this? And it may be that Mr. Strybos has an answer to that. There obviously is an SOP solution, and that has to get documented and folks trained on it, and and then compliance to those SOPs? And/or do we have an issue with folks who were, is there a personnel issue? So maybe Mr. Strabos or you combined can talk about maybe those three elements and where we think the improvements or the changes might come from.
Yeah, and I'll let John make a comment. As far as the right application, I think e-Builder is a sufficient application. I don't think there's a need to go out and look and procure something else. I think it's utilize what you have. And I think that really boils down to the issue is it's just underutilized. And that beckons to the SOPs because we didn't have the SOPs in place of how we were going to operate and use things. So as part of going forward, I think it'll be a fine application to use. John may have a different preference on a different application. That's okay too. But as far as from an internal audit standpoint, I don't have an issue with that application in particular. So that, and then as far as personnel, three of the projects we looked at East Campus, the Gamby, the General Academic and Music. We looked at the Workforce Development Center on West Campus, and then also at West Campus, the Emerging Technology Building, and then we looked at the Oso Creek, since it was the most recent and frankly one of the largest. That was why we picked it as well. And the issues span across all of those. So old leadership, new leadership, there's issues along the way, but we do have, so I don't know there's a personnel issue.
Well, I would add to that, Daniel, but there partially was, and it took us a good while to bring Mr. Stribos on board.
Right.
And even though we knew him for several years prior to his arrival, remember he came in January of 20, right before Lucky John. And so there was a few things going on. There were extenuous manual processes that still slowed us down, that probably, when it came to inputting into e-Builder, which we do believe, unless John, you tell us different, that e-Builder is at least sufficient for our work. Maybe it's time to look for something into the future. There was those processes as well. When I say these deficiencies rest in the president's office, I was trying I had a particular a former vice president's office overloaded, frankly, with both IT and construction, and I knew it. And so that part, it just took time to get through all that. Of course, there was history before that led me to that. So there was some strains put on that office, and therefore those two parts. We knew that in 2014, actually 13, that things were going to change quickly with that bond, with that first bond that came through. We took too long. I own that. And so there was personnel deficiencies, but it wasn't that the person was deficient. It's just that the structure was overloaded, and that's where I say it came from my office, but it just took us some time to get Mr. Stribos here. We held out for Mr. Stribos. He was our consultant for a few years. It took us a while for us to steal him from Alamo Colleges. I say that proudly. And the chancellor's a good friend of mine, but both chancellors, both previous and current. But so those are real things. Those are real things, and we've got to be candid about those things so that we do not make those same mistakes, and so that we rectify moving ahead. But John,
and let me clarify. When I say personnel issues, I certainly am not disparaging Mr. Stribos. I understand the change of leadership, and I understand that. My question about personnel is: do we have enough personnel?
Exactly.
Are they getting the proper
Yes,
training? Are there those? It's the entire department, not one person.
Well, I think,
and so, are there resources needed?
And there's also a little
Duly
bit of
noted.
philosophy change too, because throughout the projects, the college was using a third-party project manager as a philosophy of using someone else to help manage that. And so some of this, you could argue who's responsible, but you could argue that some of that was also their responsibility to help maintain the documentation for the project. That philosophy is no longer in place. So John's got a different philosophy. He's moving it to more of an internally managed. So that also is a component of that, right? You had staffing changes, you had a third-party service provider who was doing some of this, and so now there's a bit of a philosophy change as well. So I wanted to add that piece of context in as well. I'll let John answer for the rest.
So one of the first questions I also asked Dan was, well, is he building the right software? And he was diplomatic about his answer. He's not advocating any one product over another, which is a good thing for an auditor to do, I understand. All right. But no, I think eBuilder is the right software, partly because it's a nationally recognized software. It's a worldwide software. They have a huge database. They've just been bought by Trimble, which is an even larger company. So they're growing. They have conferences. They're firmly invested in the construction industry. They're a leader in that. I promise you can throw a rock and hit someone and say, oh, no, I would never use eBuilder. I'd use XYZ. There's a variety of products that are out there. The challenge we would have if we want to change is we're reinventing the wheel. My concern is it's like, because none of these databases like each other. They're all proprietary. And in theory, at the end of the day, with all respect to the IT, it's just an Excel spreadsheet on steroids. It's a database. It has all this data, and if you put it all in the right rows and columns, it'll all talk to each other. They make it impossible for them to do that. So we truly would go backwards. And if this were not the right software, I would have already had these discussions with the president. But no, I think this is the right software. And the auditors identified a lot of discrepancies, rightfully so. And part of what we've been doing is digitizing as much of this because I have boxes. We just live with the paper, but if it rains, if it molds, if it's in the wrong place, we just lose it all. So I'm scared to death about losing priceless plans and documents. So we're working on getting that all digitized, scanned, and in eBuilder. It takes time, it takes funding, it takes resources. Literally, we have a firm in San Antonio, and so I had an employee who was going up to San Antonio for other things. Says, hey, can you take a truckload of documents with you? So we're working in that. It's a piecemeal process. It is back to the staffing, have enough of the right staffing with the right skill set that, in my experience from the past, even internally, there's been changeover and lapses in personnel. It's like who was managing eBuilder? For a time, there was no one managing eBuilder. So there was no data getting into eBuilder. And then different personnel, and although it's very structured, someone says construction documents, what does that really mean? It means something to someone different, especially when a lot of them are more IT personnel versus architects or engineers or contractors. Because in the same way IT is its own language, construction is its own language. So it's about educating the personnel. We've resolved that. We've got one person who's in charge of that and doing a really good job. We've invested in additional training for her already in the past fiscal year. But given these requirements, we're going to need additional support. We'll work with the president on how to do that. We can work through those pieces. But it's about having the right personnel with the right skill set, right training, and tools to do this and get there. And again, the projects that were audited, except for Oso Creek, are historical projects using third-party program managers. And the third-party program manager is still in place helping out with Oso. So again, we have these parts of, well, these projects were complete, and where's the documents? So, but we're looking forward to these challenges.
And the SOP part, you feel like you've got a good handle on getting that resolved in the next month, year?
Well, I've talked to Tammy about there's only so many hours in a day and so many days in the week. And as I understand, not to speak for the auditors, but they have a way that we can work with them. They can provide us templates. They can't do the work for us, but they can provide us guide documents, and then we can own those, which is what needs to happen anyway. And so, yes, and given that they would come from us, I'd like to come from them for us to own, but then the next time they come to see, well, did we correct any of this, we can pull out their template and it's been updated and say, well, yes, and so yes. And again, a lot of the things they're looking for on these newer projects, we have these documents. I was looking at a whole set of them today. And so it is about, and they chose the right projects. They asked me what projects to audit. I said, you should audit these projects. I told them that on purpose because when they come up with these findings, I wasn't really surprised. I wish it would have been different, but at the end of the day, these are the findings I would have expected because I'm looking for the same information. I can't find this, I can't find that. And where is it? It's somewhere in that box of documents over there in the corner. So yes.
If I may, and that was one of the really critical things about this when we talked about getting this all set up. John immediately says his senses went off, and he just immediately said, "Mark, I know what we need to look at. I know where there's going to be opportunities for us to improve on." So this is, again, I'm preaching to the choir here, but it's also for the greater community as we go forth. We're scrutinizing ourselves more so than anybody here is, and by looking at ourselves and really digging out our own deficiencies, it's just a great act of integrity, and I appreciate that, John. And him being the expert that he is, an engineer and so forth, just makes it all the easier.
Just a couple of comments. First off, I feel real comfortable with Dr. Scamia, and I feel real comfortable with John.
Thank you.
And I applaud at least the last tab there that said satisfactory, which meant that the projects are being completed the way we expected to be completed. I do have concerns about standard operating procedures, because I think your standard operating procedures, and then you having the ability to be able to get resources to do the e-builder part and document what you did and what went wrong and what went right and what could have been done better. I think that's critical to repeatability.
Yes, sir.
When I was in manufacturing and the semiconductor industry, we had to reach 9,000, 9001 certifications, and everything had to do with documentation.
Right.
And those big customers that you had, the Dells, the Compacts, the Acers, all the big computer companies, required the company, for them to know that you as a supplier were going to be able to deliver the product over and over and over again, same quality, and be able to deliver on time. So it wasn't, so to speak, people dependent. If Rudy Garza left the organization, they knew that they were still going to get their product. And so again, at the end of the day, we have to have the right things in place so that, again, we may not do an Oso Creek campus tomorrow,
Right.
but at the end of the day, if you documented all the things that you did, the way that you want things to be done, to have that finished product, that predictability that you need as an organization or as an entity, then you have to have good documentation.
If I may, Mr. Chair, so the history of that brought us to that. So we came to this conversation when we came out of the 2008 bond, the 2003 bond. From 2003 to 2008, everything was put on discs and paper. And so as we were ramping up in 2014 and getting ready for that bond, which we're still working through, but when we came up on that, I told then the CIO I said, we can't do this. Where are all the other files? Where's all that history? And we came to that point. And so I asked him to research eBuilder or something to gather it. I didn't know what I was asking for specifically. I just knew what needed to be done. Because when we did ask for files from architects and engineers and contractors from before, some of them said, well, there's boxes, and then some of them said, well, we don't know. I mean, so we came a long way. So I want to really give due credit to eBuilder. You know, eBuilder may not be a 10-0 season for eBuilder, but it might be a 7-3. And so those 7, so eBuilder has served us tremendously. There is a tremendous amount, unless I'm mistaken, there's a tremendous amount of data and information stored in eBuilder. But again, John, being the investigator that he is as well, wearing that hat, knew where to go find our weaknesses. So it has been an evolution from boxes of contracts and papers and documents. And that's the digitizing that you're talking about.
Yes, sir.
You know, we're trying to preserve stuff that goes back, that precedes virtually everybody maybe not everybody in this room, but most of us. So I don't want to discount. I mean, I want to really build upon the validity and the effectiveness of eBuilder and how much equity we have in it right now.
But I'd also, I'm sorry, go ahead, Tammy, go ahead now.
Just to give a little more detail on what John mentioned earlier, working with Dr. Escamilla this week, as far as like you asked for resources, the board, when they approved our audit plan, there are some resources available for special projects. So what we have talked about is maybe using Weaver as advisory, like we did in our policy project, like we did in grants management, and having them come in, like John mentioned, and providing a framework or a template, and then we take it and we have to customize it and own it. That way it keeps the two things separate. So we have talked about using that resource, so I hope that helps. That we do already have plans and some things in motion with Dr. Escamilla.
Absolutely. So just like you weren't surprised, or you knew where you wanted to look, and these findings didn't surprise you, in a way, they don't surprise me either. In the 8 years that I've been on the board, you're the fourth person, 2 external, 2 internal, that has been overseeing construction projects, and the strength of what we have done in awarding bond contracts to multiple architects and multiple construction companies is also a weakness, because we have multiple architects
Right.
and multiple construction companies. So there are, it doesn't surprise me either that there is a lack of consistency. And so while I appreciate the work that you have been doing and the work that you're going to be doing
Right.
for these SOPs, because it's going to require you to continue building while you're designing this system over
Right.
here. And I appreciate the work that is going to take to do that. And so resources that we can bring to bear to jumpstart that. Let's not reinvent the wheel when we don't have to. So again, it doesn't really surprise me either. So I don't want you to take anything that I say as a criticism of you. It is a criticism that we all need to own.
Sure.
And all need to work better, because I think there is a great opportunity here, as Dr. Escamilla said, to build a better system for the next time we do this.
Yes.
I also, I'm grateful to staff and all the improvements that we made in all these other areas that you pointed to. In construction, I think that also when you go out in the future projects, you don't need, I know you need additional resources in terms of training, and
Right.
I think the software is only as good as the people that you have trained to be able to utilize it and get the highest percentage of power or usage or benefit from. And that's based on the training and who you train up to use that software and how well they utilize it. But when you go out, in cases where you have a project, you decide you're too busy with something that's critical, you want to turn it over to a third-party project manager, then I think one of the things in your questionnaire needs to be, what familiarity do you have with eBuilder?
Yes.
And if they can't take care of that, I'm not saying you disqualify them, I'm just saying that you then know you have to ask for resources to be able to keep fully documented what it is they're doing in terms of your construction project, so that we meet the goals that we want to meet.
Right.
Just a suggestion.
Well, no, and we had conversations in early days, and I promise you, there were prospective vendors that did not want us to go in that direction, flat out. And I said, no, this has got to be the accountability to our taxpayers, to our community, to our board, to everybody. And there was resistance from some, and it may have changed some of their minds, but some, swallowed the frog and jumped on board.
Well, believe me, anytime there's change and it requires additional accountability and some sort of rigidity, you require some rigidness in your organization or the task that you have. There's going to be some resistance for sure, right? And so again, thank you
Yes,
so much.
thank
And John?
One last comment. I recently heard about construction projects and the concepts of digital twins, that everything is done digitally, all of the plans, all the documentation. There is no paper. Yes, you can print it out to review something, but that nothing is in paper form. And the opportunity that if then you have to go back in and make a change or find a correction or follow an electronic circuit wherever, you can do all of that digitally. And so I don't know if that is happening in the commercial construction world as it is in the industrial construction world, but the concept of mandating that everything we do in the future has a digital twin, so that there's not this loss of documents, and there's not boxes in somebody's corner and somebody's got to rifle through however many boxes to find what they need.
So that is true to a certain extent. And I think the other challenge with all respect to legal counsel, is the day we go down to the courthouse because things went south, we bring in paper. So at the end of the day, everything still is done by paper. While it's on the computer and they have laptops and they're bringing up the 3D models, it's all live and real, and no, we have to go under this and over that. But it all gets translated one way or another into black and white. You go out on any construction job site anywhere, and while the prime contractors, it's all on the computer, they get down to that sub who has to pull this cable through there, and he's bringing out hard copy paper. And so we'll always have that, and that also ties back into the as-built drawings. But yes, we have the 3D drawings that are live.
Well,
Yes,
and I remember when, Jessica, you may recall, maybe Miss Delia, or even Tammy, it goes back. So when eBuilder was when we said we have to do something to capture every bit of data, every bit, and eBuilder was the choice. We brought that to the board. We brought eBuilder to the board as the solution, and we presented to it, and so we showed it to. That was the idea to the best or to the highest degree possible. In terms of twinning and making sure that everything was captured electronically and stored in cyber world. So maybe as we get through this, we can go back, and when we come back with remedies and SOPs and everything else, we can give another snippet and say, look, here's eBuilder. Here's what it actually does. Because we're talking every email.
Right.
That has to do with every email is captured in there.
Right.
Every plan, every policy, every board action, notes, interactions between the fiscal office, IT office. I mean, it is a huge portion of the universe that captures that information. That was the intent, Regent Scott. But I think we can, as we go through this and come out of this better, that we can also maybe do a commercial on the end that kind of just gives a reminder of that, because frankly, very few of the regents were here at that thing. And it was so long ago, nobody remembers, including myself on much of this.
What do we think the time frame is to remediate these? I don't know if that's a Dan question or a John question, but.
Well, I'll start with, as soon as Dan can give me the templates, and he probably already has them on his computer. They're already on my computer. No, this is clearly a priority. This is a significant investment of taxpayer funds, and we've got to have all of our ducks in a row. So I think the big difference, again, is going forward, because it's not quite impossible. It's really hard to fix all the past projects. But going forward with all the new projects, we've already got a lot of these practices in place, and we're just going to go back through and be sure they are there. And so, no, what I put in my response to Dan was by January 17th, after Martin Luther King Day, we'd have these responses in place.
Ambitious, good. I don't have any more questions or comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dan, just another question. He talks about templates being useful in order to be able to put the SOPs together. Mm-hmm. In terms of grant funding, when you came through and they were trying to get, I guess, improvement in that particular department, were there some templates or some devices that you used or some examples that you used in order for them to be able to?
I believe on the
Make
grant
the improvement
piece,
they
we provided in our recommendation all the elements that we believe that should go into a grant policy and grant procedures.
Okay.
And then by the time we got engaged to do that, Dr. Lee had already taken care of most of that. But it's similar to what we did with like the board policy project that we worked on last year. We did have and provided templates there, so we have similar and can put together similar templates. Quite frankly, what we do is we go back to other clients and whose stuff we liked, and we go pull it and combine it up and sort of take what we think is best of breed from everything and put it together, and then we'd sit down with the facilities department and say, all right, this is a good framework. What does this mean for you? And then we'd help further customize from there. Then ultimately turn it over to them. They have to own it, put it in place, distribute it, communicate it, and then maintain it from that point forward. So we help get it to where it is. Management's making all the key decisions. We're just guiding that decision process. Okay. And then we turn it over that way. We're not auditing our own work in the future. We're auditing the work of management. We just helped assemble it.
This is just a lot larger task because of the activity.
Right.
Okay.
Well, for size of the task, I mean, helping develop SOPs isn't, I wouldn't call it a bigger task than grants necessarily. They're both pretty big when you're writing SOPs. So.
Okay, let's go on.
All right, well, as far as the next audit we have the internal audit over information security, and I believe that item we have for closed session.
Okay, with that said, at this time, we're going to go into closed session pursuant to Texas Government Code 551.076, right?
You have to do all three.
All three? Okay. .071, Texas Government Code 551.076, and Texas Government Code 551.089.
Time,
Okay.
4 p.m.
Okay, the time is 4 o'clock. Okay, we finished our closed session at 4:20. We're back into our audit committee meeting. We've got one more, no action required from our closed session. At this time, we will entertain a motion in an open session.
Make a motion that we accept the reports as presented and refer them to the Board of Regents.
Second. All those in favor? Say
Aye.
aye. Aye. Okay, and that motion is approved. With nothing further to discuss, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you so much. Thank you.